Hi, this is Ian Shaw, and you're listening to the Mark and Me podcast. Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu to you ladies of Spain. For we've received orders for to sail back to Boston. And so nevermore shall we see you again.
Hello and welcome to episode 67 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark, and coming up on today's episode, it's going to be very Jaws focused. Now, you know, just me saying the word Jaws makes me excited, and I'm even more excited to announce that Ian Shaw, the son of Robert Shaw himself, will be joining me to talk all about his brand new project, The Shark is Broken. So yeah, as a huge Jaws fan, it's no secret my favourite film ever made is Jaws, and I own pretty much everything you can buy from this film. I'm absolutely thrilled that he's going to be on today's show. But in normal, typical, true Mark and Me fashion, let's touch base about the last episode. It was very music focused, and I was joined by Zach Farrow from the band Paramore and Half Noise. A great interview. Numbers were insane. It's now my third most downloaded podcast I've ever released, and that's pretty good considering it's only been just over a week. I'm sure it will get to that number one spot in a very short while. What I really liked is the feedback from everyone, not just because of Paramore, but also all the people that went and then checked out Half Noise. I saw loads of people screenshotting themselves listening on Spotify and Apple Music, saying because of the interview they then went and checked out this band, and they absolutely loved it. And that's what I want to do. I want to bring new things to people, and to know all those people that listened to Zach, enjoyed his honesty, how down to earth he was, and then invested their time in listening to his new band. Everyone absolutely loved it. So for me, it was absolutely awesome to see, and I know Zach was thrilled by the response as well. So thanks for everyone who took the time to listen to that episode. So let's get back into Jaws, something I could talk about for literally hours and hours every day. And if you ever met me, or you do meet me, that's pretty much what I do anyway. So to put it onto an episode and put it out there for you guys, it's a dream come true. Ian at the moment is currently touring in Edinburgh as you're listening to this for The Shark is Broken, which is his whole show all about Jaws. I've not been lucky enough to see it, but it has just been on in Brighton, and a couple of people that I follow on Twitter that are quite good friends, The Daily Jaws and Barking Mad About Films, have both been to see it and said it's astonishing. The performance that he portrays of his father, who in my opinion is one of the best actors of all time, but the character himself of Quint is my favourite film character of all time. People said he does it justice and does it so well. So I'm very excited. I hope that we get some more UK dates and it's a huge success so we get to see this show, because it's a dream for me to see it. But to know he's joined me on the podcast is the next best thing. And it's such a great interview. He's so honest, he opens up so much, and is just one of the nicest people I've spoken to. So I think I've juiced you all up enough now, so let's get straight to the interview. Here is me and Ian Shaw talking all about The Shark is Broken. So Ian, thanks for joining me today on the Mark and Me podcast.
You're welcome.
I wanted to start by taking it right back to the start, and when you were a kid growing up, and maybe at school, what was it you actually wanted to be when you were such a young age?
Well, I wanted to be an actor at quite a young age, actually. So it was probably, I would say, about 8. But I had a wonderful drama teacher, Michael Walsh, who would direct the school plays. Yeah. And he was very ambitious. He would always do plays that were harder to do than, like, for example, we did like Terence Rattigan. I remember we did Adventure Story, which was about Alexander the Great. So I played Alexander the Great, and I had to have a nervous breakdown, you know.
That's quite heavy for a primary school. I was doing stuff like a dinosaur fighting another dinosaur. I'm quite surprised.
Actually, I mean, I say that when I was 8, because that's probably when I wanted to be an actor. So
Yeah.
we would have done something like that more at the age of 12. But
Yeah.
I mean, even so, the parents were always kind of amazed at how sophisticated the plays that we were putting on. So I thought he was amazing. He was quite inspiring.
Obviously, that's a huge influence, and having a teacher, even now I look back at some of my primary school and secondary school teachers as shaping the person I am today. But was there certain films you were watching or actors on the TV that you were kind of taking a strong interest in?
Yeah, I'm one of those people who, perhaps it's a little bit annoying, but I like an awful lot of, I try to absorb and, take the good from a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, I like a lot of American film actors, always have done. I suppose the slightly more obscure ones would be actors like Rod Steiger, James Coburn. I really like, even though obviously he was very famous and popular, but now less so. And, my goodness, absolutely adore, De Niro and, Hoffman and all of those amazing actors. Christopher Walken, even when he's in a terrible movie, is really hard to take your eyes off.
He's always the best thing, isn't he? Even if it's a bad film, you'll still appreciate the work he does.
Yeah. I mean, Jack Nicholson, all the kind of cliche actors, but I'm a cinephile like yourself. I've spent too much time watching movies and too much time watching TV, but it's been a pleasure.
So what about movies? What were the sort of movies your parents would sit you down and watch as a kid? Because obviously, with them both being actors, surely were they happy to let you watch whatever you wanted, or were they kind of
pretty much actually? Yeah. I mean, I used to sneak down. We lived in Beverly Hills at one point, and there was a channel Z, which was 24-hour movies. I think they were mostly black and white movies. Pretty harmless. Certainly nothing. That a kid couldn't safely watch. But I would sneak down, before everyone was awake at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'd figure out how to work the TV. This would be like aged 5 or 6.
Wow.
And just sit 1 foot away from the TV and watch all these kind of like cowboy movies and film noirs and things.
That's some great films for such a young age. I was watching stuff like Ghostbusters, and the classic sort of Poltergeist would be the film that I'd try and sneak while my parents not being around. But you're watching some actual decent, very well made films.
Well, I don't know how good they were, and I watched all the other things as well. I loved Sesame Street when I was like a kid.
Yeah.
The Electric Company.
So then you were telling me at secondary school you were kind of acting, and you had this strong influence of a very strong teacher. But at what point did you realise that hopefully it become a reality that you could make that a profession? Because when you were a kid, everyone wants to be Robert De Niro or a famous footballer. But at what point did you think, this is actually what I want to do? I'm an adult now and I want to do this.
Well, I mean, coming from... both my parents were actors, so my dad was an actor, but also my mum was an actor, and they were both successful. So I guess it never really occurred to me that I wouldn't be. And so once I was interested in doing it, I thought, well, this is what I want to do. Aged 8, and it never changed really. So I think I do remember making a promise to myself that. I would give myself a lot of time. I was saying it's probably going to take a long time for you to be able to be doing, movies and things. That was my little wise 8-year-old head saying, sort of, work hard and stick at it. So, it was at a very young age. I just thought this is the most, fun to be had. Dressing up and researching people, trying to figure out who they were and pretending to be them for a living seemed to be impossibly great fun. I have not wavered since I was 8 years old.
That's good, and you've been consistent.
Yeah, I have been consistent. I wouldn't pretend that it hasn't been hard, and harder than I thought.
Yeah.
But that's what it is.
I mean, when you were in your 20s and you were acting, did you have that pressure because your parents were so well established and so well known? I mean, let's be honest about it, your father's career is legacy, so it must have been quite hard to think, how am I going to be in the same kind of realm as that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. I think I was protected by my own enormous ego when I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
So I just thought that, it wasn't going to be a problem, So that issue never arose. And then in my, 30s, there was kind of transition of thought. And then in my 40s, you're just that much wiser and more forgiving. And so I've tried to focus less on sort of any kind of competition between us, of which if I was going to, try and enter into that, my dad would win on every count, and focus on, what I have enjoyed and what I'm proud of in my own career. And funnily enough, having, written The Shark is Broken with Joseph Nixon, which is about my dad, but it's almost the thing I'm most proud of because it's my own work, and Joe's.
I want to come to that in a moment, but what I wanted to know is kind of, at what age were you when your parents were showing you the work that they had done?
I don't remember them because they died when I was very young. You know? So 5 and 8. So I mean, I remember seeing Jaws, for example.
Yeah.
And being scared. That would probably be about 8 actually, and thinking that there were sharks swimming around my bed, and calling out for my dad, and not doing a double take that Quint was coming in to save me.
Yeah.
Even though he had obviously been eaten. That wasn't a problem for me to rationalize.
It's a bit too young to remember, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, they're movies. I guess I've tended to watch them later on, I suppose.
Yeah. Were you ever lucky enough to go on set of any of the films?
Yeah, we went on set several times.
Yeah.
I remember really enjoying being on the set of The Scarlet Buccaneer. Because there were actors like James Earl Jones, and I remember him, being very friendly to us as children, and just being surrounded by all these pirates, and it seemed incredibly good fun. But most of the sets I went on to were incredibly boring, tedious places, where you just where nothing's happening really.
Yeah.
Almost more than anywhere else in the world. There's less activity because I think most of the time they're just setting up the shots. So you have these huge, thick cables snaking everywhere, and all these people kind of hanging around, but nobody seems to be doing anything. And then all of a sudden, it breaks into life, and they actually do something. So I remember going on the set. I can't remember, was it Pinewood? Anyway, wherever they filmed Force 10 from Navarone, and we were sat around for ages and ages with nothing going on, and then they blew up the dam. So it was an enormous explosion and dust sort of settling. That was one memory I have of being on that set. I remember going onto the set of Jaws and seeing Bruce, the shark. They showed me the face of the shark, which was top secret. I wasn't aware at the time how privileged I was to be in that position. Yeah, I mean, because, we traveled, whenever my dad was doing stuff, we traveled as much as possible with him. He wanted to be with his family, so, we would go on sets whenever we had the opportunity.
And do you remember the first proper time that you really appreciated watching Jaws and seeing the performance that your dad gave that I believe should have won an Oscar?
That's very kind of you. I do remember it. I remember being completely spellbound and petrified like everybody else. The Ben Gardner's boat moment and all the other things. I mean, it's a brilliant film, and I guess that it was more almost when I was like 12 and I watched it again, and I was going, this movie holds together incredibly well.
Yeah.
It's hard to find fault. Maybe just the shark at the end is kind of like one of the things, but I mean, even so, in the day, awesome. Yeah.
I literally can't fault it. If anyone asks me straight away, what's your favourite film, it's Jaws. Why? Because it's the perfect film. It's got the perfect cast. It's got some of the best dialogue. It's a great story. And it's just a big blockbuster that shouldn't have worked as well as it did because of all the production problems and the delays, and Steven Spielberg's second ever film. And it is a masterpiece. It's absolutely flawless.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it is. I mean, I know that if my dad wasn't in it, I would love the film.
Yeah.
And also, Spielberg avoids sentiment in that film, where I think once or twice later on, I find I drift away from him a little bit because of, like, for example, Jurassic Park, is a really good film, but I wished that the music, I wish he got John Williams to do the same kind of thing that he did with Jaws and make the music scary rather than reassuring.
Yeah. See, now I want to see that film. I want to see a completely different soundtrack to that and see how it works. That's just in my head now. I'm imagining it, thinking, wow, that whole T-Rex scene and all the mission of running away from these dinosaurs, instead of it being all, oh, it's going to be okay, it's not.
Yeah, no, you're going to die.
Take my money now, I want to see that.
Yeah.
And obviously you just touched base and mentioned there about your new show, The Shark is Broken. I'm sure you've been asked this many times, but for the listeners out there, how did this come about? Because it's quite late in your career that you've decided to take on this.
Yeah, I mean, some years ago I did a drama documentary about Hiroshima, and I was playing Colonel Tibbets, who was the pilot of the Enola Gay, who dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. And I just found that odd, because obviously my dad makes this speech in Jaws about being on the USS Indianapolis, where they deliver the bomb. So I felt that's a strange thing to be sort of getting the atomic bomb from my dad and then going and dropping it on Japan. Obviously not literally, we were playing characters, his fictional, mine not, but even so I thought that was a sort of odd thing. So that kind of stuck in my mind a little bit. And then, I don't know, a series of coincidences happened. I had a moustache a couple of years ago, and I looked in the mirror and I thought that I looked like Quint, and then I checked and I found that I was the similar age. Then I reread Carl Gottlieb's The Jaws Log, which, if anyone hasn't read it, is one of the best books on filmmaking, on documenting how a film is made and what goes on that I've ever read. And of course it had all those elements in there about, the relationships not always being, sunshine and roses. So then I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. So I kind of sketched out a rough idea for the play, and then I kind of became a bit ashamed, because I didn't want to kind of trade, on my dad, because that's something I tried to avoid in my life, because it just looks cheap. But then, I discussed it with a writer friend of mine, and I discussed it with my wife and some friends, and they were all kind of pushing me in the most lovely way to at least explore what it could be. I read some of my dad's private diaries when he was battling with alcohol, and then I thought, well, that's an interesting issue that I think people would like to, would be interested in exploring, if I took it seriously. So then the whole kind of thing snowballed. Me and Joseph Nixon, who's the co-writer, kind of tipped me over the edge and persuaded me to have a go at writing it. And then I really enjoyed what he wrote, and so we were firing, a page or two back and forth over a period of weeks, and then I showed it to Guy Masterson, who I really respect as a director, and, the whole thing just kind of snowballed.
Yeah.
And here we are, really.
So when you were actually writing this and it became reality, and I know you said that for a moment you'd kind of put it on the shelf and not thought any more about it, when the reality came about that you had someone, you had a director, you had these people involved that you trust, how did it go about with actually thinking about the casting? Because obviously, like you said, it's uncanny when you've got this moustache how much you look like your father, but that's not it. We also need to look at Hooper and Brody. How did you even think about what we're going to do to get these, vital members part of this show? I
had somebody in mind for Scheider, who is somebody I greatly respect as an actor, and who is a friend of mine.
Yeah.
That I've worked with before. So he was kind of always penciled in, and then he wanted to do it, so that was great. As far as finding Liam Murray Scott, it was I've never met him before, so it was just a question of auditioning.
Yeah.
So we put out the word, and we kind of whittled it down to a short list of 10 actors, and then we auditioned them, and he was wonderful. So we were all in agreement that he was to be the one. It's a very odd thing, actually, because I spent all my life coming in an audition room, nervous and trying to impress people. And when you're on the other end, and it was the first time I'd sat there auditioning people, you really feel for the person coming in the room. I kind of wish I'd done it before, to get some perspective. It's you really want them to be great, and you really have great respect, actually, because it's a hell of a thing to do, to walk in a room and perform and get a job, I think.
Do you think you're probably a bit more lenient or understanding because you've been on the other side and you're not just a guy with a clipboard saying next?
Yeah, I mean, I think they inevitably.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you really know what they're going through, and I hope so. I mean, I called everyone who didn't get the part to talk to them about it and thank them, because they were all really good,
Most people would just get a standard template email saying you've been unsuccessful or not here at all, so to know they get a personal phone call probably means a lot. Yeah,
well, actually, in my experience, it's you just don't hear anything at all.
Yeah.
And once or twice you get told that the job is yours, and then you still don't hear anything, and then it's kind of melted away. And that's a horrible one. That's happened a couple of times.
That's awful.
But my God, actors like to complain, and I'm definitely one of those.
What I wanted to know is when you were actually preparing for the role of Quint, and Quint is such an iconic character, and I think to go and actually take on the role that your father did so well, was there anything that you discovered about him, or you had a new respect, or was it emotionally quite hard and draining to take on that role? Because surely when you were researching and watching the clips again, it must have really brought home the fact that unfortunately he's no longer here and how much of a loss he is.
That's a great question. I mean, it was definitely emotional, no question. But I definitely would also label it as a positive experience, because I did discover things about him that I didn't know. I read all the newspaper interviews he ever gave, and watched as many clips of him being interviewed as well, and spoke to family, and I come away with more respect for him. I think his his thinking was very sound in a lot of ways, and sympathy for him as well, in the struggles that he had. Occasionally there are one or two times where you kind of wince a little bit, but that's family. And so, yeah, I found it to be, because I thought, when he died, I was obviously devastated, and then my grief seemed to last for about 10 years. So by the time I was becoming to be an adult, I'd sort of felt that I'd finished the grieving process. And then it's only now, from having sort of, dug around and done all this research and written about him and started to play him, that I actually feel, oddly, that it is kind of the last, I guess you'd call it an appendix to grief,
Yeah.
A really positive experience, yeah.
I mean, you mentioned only a moment ago about reading some of his diary entries and journals that he did, and that must be very raw. I think I couldn't even put myself in that mindset to even open that first page. It just must be a lot of respect for you for doing that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is very, raw, but I don't know. It's kind of like it's good also to, at some point in your life, to kind of, open the cupboards and, and see what's in them. So,
yeah.
And I think also the thing, when you're making, I was going to say art, that sounds very pretentious. When you're telling a story, so that you're kind of recycling all these kind of good and bad things to turn them into something else, it just seems to be a process that that feels positive in the end. So, because I'm hoping that some people will see the play, and because we do, show my dad drinking quite heavily. I think that's fair enough to say without giving too much away about the play. I guess people would expect that. And, we don't shy away from that. And, I hope that people will think about that, because, those are some of the issues that, we have in society that we need to address.
I don't want to spoil too much, because I know people listening will hopefully go and get a ticket to see the play, but do you touch base on kind of the friction between your father and Dreyfus? Because we've read about some of the stuff that's happened, and obviously in Carl's book it touches upon it, but we do hear about the onset friction and the fact that they probably weren't that friendly and they were getting on each other's nerves quite a lot, or do you try and avoid that?
No, I mean, that would be a central theme of the piece, would be the relationships, and it's the relationship between Dreyfus and Shaw, as far as I'm aware, wasn't simple.
No.
So, I guess I would kind of think of it as, in my mind, and I hope this wouldn't be considered to be in any way pejorative, but I would kind of think of it as a sort of Italian, Russian, Irish thing, where you can go from one temperature to another quite quickly.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's juicing me up now to watch the play, and I wish I could see it and then talk to you again, because I've got so many questions, but I don't want to ruin it. It's kind of like seeing a trailer for a film. Sometimes I want to get excited, but then it leaves me on the edge of my seat thinking, I need to see it now.
Well, that's terrific. I'm thrilled that you feel that way.
As I'm speaking to you right now, you're currently rehearsing, and how is it going? Are you enjoying it? Is there any challenges that you're finding you weren't prepared for, or is it going, without a silly pun, is it going swimmingly? Is it going well?
It's going very well, and I was imagining it to be a harder process, but the people I'm working with, I think, are very behaving. They're just very professional, and so I'm really, really pleased with where we are. We've had to lose some of it, so that was tricky to know which bits to cut, because for Edinburgh we're doing 70 minutes, and we had 90 minutes.
Wow, that's quite a lot of editing.
Yeah, so things have had to hit the cutting room floor, and but they'll probably come back if we need to. If we're going to tour, if we were going to do a tour, it would probably, those things would probably come back in. But that's really good as well. It's very interesting, that process of having to figure out what you need to weed out. And the most liberating thing in the world, and the nicest feeling, was coming home after rehearsal and feeling that a line was a problem, and then just sitting down and writing a new one, and not being lazy, not doing that thing. I don't mean when actors just aren't trying to figure out whether there is a way to do it, but just knowing that something is wrong and correcting it as best you can was one of the nicest feelings. You feel like you're in control, which I haven't felt for most of my life. I felt like I'm an actor for hire, and that was liberating.
And you just mentioned then it's going to be playing at the Edinburgh Festival. Now, if all goes well, is the vision and the hope that you then get to do a tour and do a number of venues with this instead of just being a few shows? Would you like the actual play to go, across Europe or even, across the pond?
It's a great question. I mean, we're really going to have to see what the reception is. Obviously, if it's a disaster, then we would have to rethink. Obviously, conceptually, it's not a disaster because people are buying tickets quite quickly. And for Brighton, we sold out for the previews, 6 weeks before opening night. So the idea is obviously really popular. Jaws is obviously still as popular as ever. And I think people are intrigued, at a behind-the-scenes peek at, on the Orca. So, if critically it's a failure, then we would probably, try and address that, rewrite things, talk to people, see what was wrong, what worked, what didn't. But yes, I mean, I think that hopefully it has a life beyond. For how long, I can't say. I can't imagine wanting to do this for more than a couple of years. But I wouldn't rule it out at this point.
I mean, you took to YouTube and put out a short rehearsal clip of the famous section from the Indianapolis speech that your father delivered. It's just perfection for me. But the way you did it, with the mannerisms and the way that your voice is and the characteristics and everything that you put into that performance, you must have sat and read some of the comments that people left on social media. You couldn't have been prepared for how great that response was.
No, I was totally unprepared. People have been really kind. I am bracing myself for some sort of backlash of negativity at some point, because you know what the internet's like, and Twitter and all these things. You see other people getting into all sorts of difficulties and so on and so forth, and so I am kind of bracing myself. At some point, I think some of the fans may not consider the play to be what they were hoping, which is totally fair enough. That's just the way things go. But yes, I am slightly riding high on a wave of positivity from the fans in that respect, and I'm very grateful for that, because it gave me the energy to complete the project.
When I watched it, I just read the first 5 or 6 comments on YouTube, and people are just obsessed with Jaws. People don't just like Jaws. Jaws is your life. If you're a big fan of Jaws, you own all the merchandise, the toys, the DVD, the video, the Blu-ray, the 4K when it comes out. Everyone wants everything, and it's a hard... It must have been quite a lot of pressure, because you must have put it out and clicked that submit button and thought, please, no one turn on me. I don't want everyone to rip me to pieces for trying to imitate such a good performance. But it was the opposite. I absolutely sat there and was so proud, because I was just like, yes, everyone's recognising this hard work and effort, and it's done with so much respect. I think that's why people are loving it so much. Yeah,
I mean, that's probably the key thing to say. I think you've put your finger on it. It's a homage.
Yeah.
To the great work that they all put in. I'm enormously proud of my dad.
Yeah.
But I'm also, in awe of all the other many people on that film who excelled themselves.
I've said it during the interview today, but I always think he should have got the best supporting actor. I do. I think Jack Nicholson deserved the main, but I think as support he should have got it.
Yes, probably, actually, yeah.
But people will argue with me, and people listening now will probably take to Twitter and tell me I'm wrong, but, it's not... At least I stand by what I believe in.
Yeah, well, that's what Twitter's for.
Yeah, it's a nasty place at times. But one of the things when I was doing some research and looking at what you've done in your career, one of the highlights must be the fact that you got to work with Mark Rylance. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that.
No, he's the best actor I've ever worked with, certainly in the theatre. Spellbinding, wonderful, so light on his feet. But he could be heavy if he wanted to as well. Just, he's so mercurial and funny, really funny. So I did Much Ado About Nothing with him in the West End, and I got offered a job to do a film, and so I went to Thelma Holt, who was the producer at the time, and I said, well, I've got this film, can I possibly do it? And so we came to an arrangement, and I bought my way out of the play. And so then I was able to sit in the theatre and watch the thing from the perspective of the audience. And he was even better than I thought from standing next to him, He was amazing.
I bet you could learn so much just from watching him, being in the same room. No textbook will teach you what you can learn from that.
No, I mean, and you do learn a few things, but you do end up being a bit baffled as to how sometimes, these people can transform themselves so convincingly.
And you've obviously had a long acting career. You've been in many, many different projects, but after this big one, which is so personal and from the heart, where do you see yourself going? Is there anything that you'd love to achieve that you don't think you have at this point in your career? Is there something, would you like to get behind the camera and direct and film, or where is it your head's at? What would you like to achieve with the future that's ahead of you?
I would absolutely love to direct. That's a very fortunate position to be in. Almost all the aspects of filmmaking, intrigue me. I imagine the most likely place for me to end up is continuing writing, actually. I would dearly love to have a screenplay made into, a feature film. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on next. But who knows? Who knows what this will lead to? There may be some opportunity if this works, touch wood.
Yeah. And as we sit here right now recording this interview, if people do want to check out this The Shark is Broken, you've just told me that Brighton's already sold out so many weeks ahead, but what can they do? If people are obviously attending the Edinburgh Festival, that's an opportunity to come and see you?
Yeah, we're at Assembly Festival Studio 3, and we're there not every night in August because, actually I say night, it's in the, it's 11 o'clock in the morning because that's where, the theatre tends to be done in the first half of the day and they tend to do comedy in the second half. So we are doing I'm doing another play that I've adapted with Duncan Henderson, who's playing Shider in Jaws. We're huge fans of Damon Runyon, so we are alternating The Shark is Broken with, two of Damon Runyon's short stories.
Oh, nice. You're going to be a busy man.
Yes.
Is there any more shows going to be happening in Brighton, or are they all sold out, or is there any...
We will definitely return to Brighton and do at least a week here in the autumn, or maybe a bit later, because people have been badgering me and they're frustrated that they can't get a ticket. So we would definitely do at least a week here.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate your time and coming on to the podcast today to talk about this, and it's now just left me wanting to just fast forward straight to there and sit in Brighton, go to the sea, and then in the evening come and see your show. It just sounds so exciting, and I'm hoping that the next time I talk to you, you've just announced a world tour because the world want to see it.
That'd be nice. Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate it.
So there it is. There's me and Ian Shaw. What a lovely guy. What a great interview. Very personal. He opened up and let his guard down a lot and talked all about those diaries of his father. It can't have been easy reading those, and for him to be that honest and open with me on this episode is very, very flattering for me, and I'm very honoured that he took the time out before this show and talked to me all about it. And if you guys are anything like me, you would have listened to this interview and now all you want to do is go and see The Shark is Broken. If you're one of the Scottish listeners, I suggest right now, while the Edinburgh Fringe is just about to be on, go and check this out. I believe there are still tickets, but it will probably sell out. There's a number of showings, and you really need to go and check it out because this is going to be unbelievable. I'm so happy that he took the time to talk to me, and as you can probably hear, it's just been a dream come true. To hear those stories about his father, someone that I respect and have so much love for and I see as an absolute role model and idol of mine, it really is just absolutely awesome. I hope you've all enjoyed this interview as well, and I want to say a big thank you for Ian taking the time out, because when this was recorded, he was rehearsing for the play, and obviously time's very sacred, so to know he took the time out and spent it with me, it means the world. And as always, everyone, if you've really enjoyed today's episode, let me know. I love reading the people's feedback. You can go on to markandme.com, and on there there's links to my Facebook page, my Twitter page, my Instagram, or even email. You know this, I say it on every single episode, but it's very important to me. I read and reply to every single message I get. Even if there's 10,000 messages, I will sit there and reply to every single one. Because you taking the time to listen is why I do this. And then if you love it, then it's an absolute bonus. But it's a real important, and this one's a very personal one to me. And I love reading all the feedback. And also, if you really want to get involved with Mark and Me, I do have a Patreon page. You can go on there and support me for as little as about $1 a month. So for us British listeners, it's about 70p. For that, there's loads of stuff. There's like a monthly prize draw to win Funkos or signed merchandise or really cool exclusive gifts. There's loads and loads of different prizes up there, and I'll be announcing them on the 1st of every month. Not only that, you're going to get a welcome pack after 3 months. So you get some stickers and badges and loads of stuff like that. But also, all the money that goes into it goes straight back into the podcast. I don't actually pay myself anything. I have to renew and subscribe for bandwidth and for space to host the podcast. And when you get these big episodes, it takes a lot, so you have to pay a lot of money to host these episodes. But not only that, it allows me to travel and do more and more podcasts. And you know me, I love doing face-to-face stuff. So if I can ever get guests that are not too far from home, I will go there and put out these episodes for you. As always, everyone, you know what I like to do. I'm not going to tell you who the next guest is, but it's only going to be a week away. And I've shown it to one of my very close friends the other day. He listened and told me it's the best thing I've done. So that's nice to kind of tease you with. But until then, I want you to take care, look after yourself, and I'll speak to you all in a week's time.
No one likes us, I don't know why. We may not be perfect, but heaven knows we try. But all around, even our old friends put us down. Let's drop the big one and see what happens. We give them money, but are they grateful? No, they're spiteful and they're hateful. They don't respect us, so let's surprise them. We'll drop the big one and pulverize them. Asia's crowded, Europe's too old, Africa's far too hot and Canada's too cold, and South America stole our name. Let's drop the big one, there'll be no one left to blame us. We'll save Australia, don't wanna hurt no kangaroo. Build an all-American amusement park there. They got surfing too. Boom goes London, boom Paris. More room for you and more room for me. In every city, the whole world round will just be another American town. Oh, how peaceful it will be. We'll set everybody free. You wear a Japanese kimono, baby, be Italian shoes for me. They all hate us anyhow. So let's drop the big one now. Let's drop the